So I would like to introduce the next person coming to the podium. And I'd like to bring to the stage from our other co-presenting sponsor. UW Health has been an exceptional partner of this event, the Urban League of Greater Madison, and for MadREP. Since I've been in this position, Shiva Badar has been, let's give her a round of applause. You all know her. She has been a friend to the Urban League, someone who we can always count on in a lot of different ways. She served on the city council for a number of years, and she was always a supporter and a friend of us. And now at UW Health, she continues to support the Urban League and MadREP. Without further ado, can we give Shiva a round of applause as she comes to the stage?
Buenas tardes. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much, Dr. Anthony, for that kind introduction. I'm Shiva Badar. I'm the Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer for UW Health, and really honored to be a sponsor for this great event for the 10th year, actually. We were here 10 years ago, and we continue to really understand how important it is to bring all of us together to really think about diversity, equity, and inclusion within the context of economic development for our region. So thank you also to the Urban League of Greater Madison and MadREP for everything you do on a daily basis to advance these two issues in our community in a symbiotic way that really create a language about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion for the future of our region. And again, we are happy to be partners in your work, especially in the work that we're doing around our Pathways programs at UW Health. And with that, I want to also do one other thing, which is to say Happy Mother's Day to any mom who's from Mexico, El Salvador, or Guatemala, or anybody that has a mom who's from Mexico, El Salvador, or Guatemala. May 10th is an important day of celebration in those countries, and for those of us who are immigrants and know people that come from those countries. And then Happy Mother's Day in advance for everybody else coming Sunday. And now, I am really excited to welcome up today's closing keynote speaker, Lela Lee. Lela is a cartoonist, writer, and actress whose experiences as a woman of color and as a child of immigrants in America intersect to create an identity that is layered by race, gender, culture, and traditions, old and new. Her work often investigates where a collective culture creates contradictions with the new generation who want to individuate but still belong. Her weekly comic strip, Angry Little Girls, has become the umbrella name for the highly successful Angry Little Girls book series, which has been translated and published in multiple languages and sold all over the US and abroad. Please join me in giving a warm Madison area welcome to our keynote speaker, Lela Lee.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you to the Urban League of Greater Madison for inviting me to this conference for economic development and diversity. Whenever I'm invited to speak, I do a little research on the group who has invited me. I think about what the audience might want to learn from me. I'm going to get there we go. I went onto the Urban League of Greater Madison's website to learn more, and as I was researching, the organizers requested a Zoom meeting. Wonderful. I was just wondering what they wanted me to talk about. So on the Zoom meeting, Ed, Jessica, and Brian proudly shared how Madison has great job sectors in science, technology, healthcare, and information logistics, with top companies like Exact Sciences and Epic. But they also discussed the dilemma that Madison faces. Good people are hired, and then after a few years, they leave for other cities. They wanted me to know that the goal of this conference was to help leaders think about what they would need to do what they would need to do to improve the quality of life in Madison so they can keep their talented workforce from moving out of the region. Before I share my ideas, I'd like to say that your community is very lucky to have the Urban League of Greater Madison that cares and actively wants to better its community. So I'd like to introduce myself. I want to acknowledge that I'm not from here. I'm an outsider. I'm a 48-year-old Asian woman who owns a creative business. I'm a writer, an actress, a cartoonist, and a hobby gardener. I'm also a mom to 2 teenage boys, and I've been happily married to my husband for 20 years. Before I came to become this blend of all these facets, I want to tell you a little bit about my background so you can understand how I see the world. I'm the 4th and last born in a family of all daughters. My strict Korean parents immigrated to Los Angeles in 1974, and shortly thereafter, I was born. My sisters and I grew up in an all-white town, and my parents, this is our dry cleaners. My parents ran a very busy dry cleaners that I often worked at after school and during school breaks. In grade school, I showed talent in art, but was told to give that up for more academic pursuits. I attended an all-girls Catholic school, I studied hard, and I attended UC Berkeley. In college, I had no idea what I'd major in. My parents wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer. I was contemplating a law degree, but a friend's father gave me some good advice. Take any class that interests you. Because of this advice, I took all kinds of classes. I took sociology, film studies, women's studies, Asian Am, drama. I also took a video class where I created the angry little Asian girl. At the time, I had no idea that this little video I made late at night on the floor of my college apartment would be the seed of a big tree. What all these classes made me realize was a viewpoint like mine was lacking in media, and the angry little Asian girl beckoned me to keep developing her. Having a creative career was my ambition right out of college, but I had to have odd jobs to pay for life. So I had a lot of funny jobs. Not surprisingly, I worked for my mom at her cleaners until my parents finally sold it. Then I was a tutor, a babysitter, a phone solicitor. I delivered prescriptions to elderly people who couldn't drive. I worked at the concession stand in a movie theater. I worked as a waitress at a sushi restaurant. I worked at a clothing store. I worked at a t-shirt manufacturer downtown Los Angeles. I worked as a temp in offices. I did clerical work at a rental company. I also worked at computer trade shows. This is really funny. And I was also a substitute teacher at grade schools in South Central Los Angeles. So I had a lot of work experience. With my fancy college degree, I could have gotten a career track job, but honestly, I preferred to get jobs I could leave. I didn't want anyone to rely on me. I always had one foot out the door because my main goal was to have a creative career. And after many years of hustling, I now own my own company, Angry Little Girls, Inc. Thank you. That sells my artworks in books, apparel, and gift products. My working experience and the journey to owning and running my own business, I learned that life has universal laws. Universal laws are intrinsic, unchanging laws that the ancient cultures have always intuitively known. The law of gravity existed way before it was discovered by Isaac Newton, but we humans have named the 12 laws of the universe: the law of divine oneness, the law of vibration, the law of correspondence, the law of attraction, the law of inspired action, the law of perpetual transmutation of energy, the law of cause and effect, the law of compensation, the law of relativity, the law of polarity, the law of rhythm, and the law of gender. What? These universal laws apply to business too. Work's universal laws. Number 1, the law of using your talent. Everyone has a God-given gift. I showed artistic talent in elementary school. My parents pushed me to be academic, but after I gave them my college diploma, I was done ignoring the call to be creative. Using the advice of my friend's father, I took acting classes, singing classes, I tried painting and improv, and after a lot of trial and error, I found my thing: comics, acting, and writing. From all these classes, I was lucky to have great teachers and mentors. My acting teacher was one such person. She gave me and every student in her class a copy of this quote: It's On Commitment by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Until one is committed. Do you guys know this quote? Oh my God. You must know this quote. Look it up online and print it out. On Commitment by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Until one is committed, there is always hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness, concerning all acts of initiative and creation. There is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans, that the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising to one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance, which no man would have dreamed would come his way. Whatever you can do or dream, you can begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. This old quote was just black words on white paper, but when my teacher gave it to me and read it to me, it felt like magic. This quote summed up says, at the moment of commitment, the entire universe conspires to assist you. I put it on my corkboard, and I read it many times whenever I had a dark moment of doubt. And this quote has proven itself true. I'm going to get back to this later on in the speech. The other law of work is the law of creation. Life doesn't just happen to us. To make things happen in my life, I knew I needed to take action. Instead of waiting for something to magically come my way, I took small action steps every day to make my creative career. I made it a rule that I had to write every day or I had to draw every day. I made this a rule so I could work towards my goal. Number three, the law of growth and momentum. Inherent in anything with energy is that you will grow the thing according to your attention to it. At the start of an enterprise, small steps are taken. Social media accounts, bank accounts are set up. Small steps lead to bigger steps. Momentum is gained, and as you build your enterprise. Number 4, the law of abundance. There is an unlimited supply of resources in the world. Everything we could ever need or want is already waiting and available to us. Now, this sounds kind of magical, and you think that it's impossible because your practical brain is thinking, how is that going to be possible? But Troy was up here talking about all these funds that are available to entrepreneurs, and I have an example of this as well for how I started. So I had committed to putting Angry Little Asian Girl on 300 t-shirts, which I sold out of the trunk of my car. I used a credit card to pay for screen-printed shirts, and with a loan from my sister, I bought a computer, a scanner, a drafting table, and after a few years went by, I still needed to pay off that credit card and my sister's loan that was accruing interest. Then, out of what seemed like thin air, I was still working really hard, but what seemed like out of thin air, I landed a national commercial that paid off the shirts and my sister. And this experience made me believe Goethe's quote was true. The universe knew I had made a commitment and provided what I needed just at the right time. Number 5, the law of gender and gestation. The world cannot exist without males and females. Positive cannot be known without its negative. Light cannot be known without darkness. Plants and trees would not be able to propagate without their respective seeds. The law of gender means that everything has its own gestation period of growth. We know it takes 9 months to birth a baby. The law of gender means there is a gestation period for successful outcomes. And this is true because each outward victory I experienced had a lot of invisible work behind it. Number 6, the law of expectation. Entrepreneurship is a journey of faith. It's easy to believe something you can see happening, but true faith and belief is to believe in the unseen. An entrepreneur is able to look into the future and bring into existence those things that she sees in her mind's eye. The faith it takes to bring that into existence is divinely inspired. It not only takes hard work, but it takes believing that what you bring to market will succeed. This is where faith and belief play a vital part to your success. Number 7, The law of reciprocity. Give and it will be given to you. When an entrepreneur develops a superior product or offers an excellent service, the customers will return the favor. I have 2 great stories about the law of reciprocity, and I'll talk about this later in my speech as well. Number 8, the law of perseverance. Dripping water hollows out stone, not through force, but through persistence. When I had my funny day job, sometimes I barely had any energy because I'd worked a full day. But I made it a rule. I had to do 1 hour a day on my art and writing. Eventually, that hour grew into a full day, and my creative pursuits became my job. Number 9, the law of change. Nothing stays the same. Everything changes. Businesses must adapt and improve. When my Angry Little Asian Girl animated video had created a buzz around Hollywood, I was presented with a development offer. But the executive asked, before we give you this offer, would you take the Asian girl out? I was young, and getting a development offer out of college was a big opportunity that didn't happen for everyone. But taking the Asian girl out sat wrong with me. I thought about why I needed to draw this character. It was because I saw no representation of myself in the media. I was drawing this so I could be seen. I passed on the executive's offer, but I did change the name to Angry Little Girls. I included more diverse girls and started writing stories for them in my comics. And when I did, I got a book deal. And I went on to publish 6 more. I changed. I adapted, but I did keep the Asian girl. And now, 29 years later, Hollywood thinks Asians are very trendy, so it seems Hollywood has changed too. These universal principles I discovered as I navigated creating a business, but a business needs people. An entrepreneur needs employees and customers. In my experience working, I came to understand 3 things about people. People buy people. Good people know other good people. And if you don't give good people a reason to stay, good people will leave. I'm going to share 2 stories that exemplify these principles. I often exhibit at comic conventions. At one such convention, a young man in his 20s came into my booth. He was reading my books and commented that he liked them. I asked if he wanted to join my comics newsletter so he could receive them in his inbox every week. He declined. He then asked me if I was in publishing. I told him I recently started self-publishing after my book rights had reverted back to me. I asked him if he was in publishing. He said he wasn't, but he was looking to illustrate for an author. I looked at him. He looked like a college student, and I asked him if he was in school. He said he was. I advised him to take a writing class. I explained that if he was drawing for an author, he would be a work for hire, and he would never own his art. I told him, if you know how to write and draw, you can own your work. I told him to copyright everything he drew or wrote with the Library of Congress for $65, because if anyone was found infringing his work, that copyright certificate would award him for damages. I could tell he was very grateful for my advice. He began looking around my booth for something to buy. He bought a birthday card, and at checkout, he asked me to put him on my comics email list. I gave him advice and knowledge on how to protect himself from being exploited. It cost me nothing to share my experience and help him see a bigger possibility he wasn't aware of. And because of that, he wanted to buy something from me and stay in contact with my work. Here in action was the law of reciprocation and people by people. Here's another story. In 2015, I had my own animation actively in production. I was so busy, I could not put up a job listing. So I asked a friend who was an animation professor to ask his interested students to email me their resumes and a cover letter. Out of all the letters, there was one candidate who wrote a letter with the right tone, the right knowledge, the right formatting. I called her and hired her on the spot. She started the next day. I was right to hire her because she was the best assistant. She was a hard worker. She figured things out without me having to tell her, and she anticipated my needs before I even knew I had them. After we delivered the episodes, we were told there would only be 1 season. We would be done after delivery. I really wanted to keep her on, but I had no work for her. When she left, I was very sad, but talent needs a reason to stay. We stayed in touch on Facebook, and about a year later, she reached out to me because she was applying for an animation teaching position. She needed a letter of recommendation, and I happily wrote her a glowing one. In this story are the 3 laws about business and people. The universal principles here are: 1, Good people know other good people. My professor had students who could help me. 2, I had to honor the fact that my assistant had to use her God-given gifts. 3, good people will move on to better opportunities because if you don't give them a good reason to stay, good people will leave. So how can Madison use these universal principles to accomplish their goal? Madison wants to be Plan A. In my funny job days, the day job that I liked the most was substitute teaching, but it had the most responsibility. I really enjoyed the energy and humor of the sweet kids in elementary schools I substituted at. The kids often drew me pictures and handed them to me at recess. I knew I could easily fall in love with teaching kids. I could easily see myself falling into the safety and stability of a teaching job. But substitute teaching was not my ambition. I knew I had a stronger calling to be a storyteller. I didn't want to not give my dream a chance. So after a few weeks, I quit. I took Plan B completely off the table and gave myself no other option but to make Plan A work. I read the objective of the Advance Now report, and this conference is to make Madison a destination region. If Madison wants to be a Plan A for good people, Madison needs to provide companies with healthy work cultures, and 2, a vibrant community to live in. Based on the Zoom call, it sounds like the job sectors in Greater Madison are amazing, but a pattern has emerged that is noticeable. People vote with their feet. They leave to other metropolitan destinations like Seattle, the Bay Area, Denver, Dallas, Phoenix, DC. And this made me wonder, are there blind spots in the workplaces? So without offending anyone, because I think people for the most part are living out a blueprint that we were given from the generation before, I'd like to say my parents were doing their best, but the blueprint they used was old, and like software, it could have used regular updates. My parents had an unconscious bias towards girls. The reason they had so many daughters was because my father really wanted a son. They would fight us if we told them what they believed was wrong. They just answered, "That's the way it is." So I don't want to offend anybody's workplace, but I'm going to name some frustrating patterns. And this might be the first time you may be told about these patterns because when I left many a toxic workplace, I never told my employer the real reason I was leaving. Your former employees probably won't tell you working at your company is rigid or that the hierarchy is maddening. So I'll tell you the patterns because I'm an outsider and I'm leaving after the speech. So these patterns are from a book titled What Works for Women at Work. It's by Joan C. Williams and Rachel Dempsey. And when I came across this book, it was like getting a doctor's diagnosis for the mysterious illness that didn't have a name. As I read this book, I realized my Asianness compounded the problems that other non-Asian women encountered in the workplace. This is a book about patterns working women encounter, but there is overlap, and I believe it would apply to a man of color as well, because in any workplace hierarchy, there is an in-group. Historically, the in-group has been white males, so I've tailored the descriptives of the groups to be more general because not all white people are exclusionary. Let's go through the patterns. The good enough and prove it again. What's important for a given job? Whatever the in-group male candidate has. Women and outsider males have to prove themselves over and over again. Women and outsider males have to be better prepared than in-group male candidates. Outside males and women's work is attributed to hard work. The in-group men are considered brilliant. There are different rules for working women. There are different rules that working women must follow. Working women who are shunted into undervalued, dead-end, traditionally feminine roles must still be recognized for their competence while smiling and being nicer as opposed to assertive and manly. Women must be non-threatening, not upset the hierarchy, and create the sense that they fit into the organization. They are relegated to their gendered lanes, and moving outside of their lane is met with higher-ups forgetting what they accomplished last week and asking for the working woman to prove it again. I hope that this is enough time to read the comics. I don't know if it's too small, but I'm not going to read them to you. You can read them on the website if you miss it. Slide 16. Okay, number 2, benevolent sexist, mansplaining and think sweetie. So men think they know more than women, and the way they explain their knowledge has been named as mansplaining. It's usually a tad condescending in tone, and they think they're being helpful, but the man is usually being a benevolent sexist with terms like, thanks, sweetie, how old are you, honey, or using pet names. Or men don't want to wait for the women to finish their thought, so they talk over her or interrupt. A really good article is it's a Canadian article that my friend sent me, and I won't read it to you, but if you want to look at that, you can. The other pattern is the maternal wall. When working women become moms, they will find themselves hitting a maternal wall. Sometimes there is a biological pull, but that erases the bias and discrimination that push mothers out of the office and into the home. Mothers are more likely to be sidelined for being seen as prioritizing family over work and more likely to be seen as deficient in their commitment to their work, because good mothers put their children first. And when they go on maternity leave, she may find herself squeezed out as male and female coworkers start jockeying to steal the new mom's job. The discrimination against mothers is viewed as culturally acceptable because it is a form of benevolent sexism. It's based on good intentions. Some women drop out of the workforce, abandoning careers they've spent decades building to become economically vulnerable in the process. Later, if she finds work again, she will make less because employers will assume she has a husband who is a breadwinner. Successful moms are seen as both defective parents and defective workers. The system presents women with two mutually exclusive ideals and then punishes them for not living up to both. It's tricky because benevolent sexism seems caring. Years ago, a new Asian American sitcom was staffing. An Asian show hadn't been on the air in 20 years. I had recently had a baby, but I really wanted my writing agent to submit me for it. He told me over the phone, sweetie, honey, you can't do that. You have kids at home. I told him to submit me anyway, but I never heard anything to know if he did or not. Interruptions and the stolen idea. Another phenomena is that in-groups men's successes tend to be noticed and remembered, while women's and outsiders males are more likely to be overlooked and soon forgotten. Women and outsider males get talked over, and their ideas can often be stolen. So this is a 2007 FedEx commercial called The Stolen Idea.
We have got to cut costs, people. Ideas.
We could open an account on FedEx.com, save 10% on online express shipping.
Okay, how about this? We open an account on FedEx.com, we save 10% on online express shipping.
That is wonderful. You just said the same thing I said, only you did this.
No, I did this.
Makes all the difference.
Bingo.
That's good.
Right on the nose.
It's really good.
I mean, that's kind of accurate. You can put yourself in the young man's position, and it would apply. The fifth pattern is walking a tightrope, the right way to be a working woman. Being likable versus being successful. You're criticized if you're too feminine and criticized if you're too masculine, striking a balance between being nice and authoritative. Furthermore, backlash against women who are seen as masculine may come from other women as much as, or more than, it comes from men. Pattern 6, conflict avoidance. Women and people of color are conditioned to avoid open conflict. The strong hierarchy within a workplace determines who may voice an opinion and who must suppress it. Suppression of true opinions is a delicate dance of role segregation, indirect communication, and polite inattention. When a problem arises, people in lesser positions do not want to disrupt the false harmony. We've been conditioned to keep things status quo by remaining the good girl or good boy who is quiet and well-behaved. Number 7, are good girls leaders? Women and outsider males have a hard time being leaders because of our family and societal positions. We bring this conditioning to the workplace. Rarely do you see a leader, but we see good girls who wait for higher-ups to tell us what to do. Good girls end up doing the office housework, taking notes, planning events, getting coffee, making everyone comfortable. Women are more likely to be praised for undervalued activities such as teaching and nurturing children. In-group men are praised for research, skills, and ability. This is a gendered reason why women have more to overcome to become accepted leaders. Women and outsider males cannot make any mistakes. Any risk-taking is avoided because when a woman or an outsider male takes a risk and fails, it stains their reputation, whereas an in-group male is lauded as brave. It's also particularly infuriating when women's failure to get ahead is attributed to the fact that women are too risk-averse. This blames the victim. The reputations of women and outsider males is fragile. In a nutshell, in-group men's statuses are much more resilient. The token woman, black person, brown person, Asian person, etc., fighting to be the favorite and fitting in. Tokenism. Only one of a marginalized group is allowed. While in-group men will be promoted on their merits, talented and ambitious tokens will have to compete and undercut a second token because for the token, there has only been one seat at the table. Furthermore, to tokenism, objective requirements are applied strictly to women and outsider males, but leniently to in-group men. This is called in-group favoritism. In-group favoritism often emerges in the form of leniency bias. Rules are applied vigorously to an out-group and leniently to members of an in-group. Who borrows a couple of pens from the supply closet or steals ideas and takes credit from a member of the out-group? Leniency shows up in the policing of behavior. And 9, media and society relies on the vintage media images of women and people of color. These inaccurate and sometimes unfair vintage images create an objectification that stereotypes others. A business-oriented man versus a frivolous woman. Men have disagreements. Women have catfights. Women are gossiping or talking about clothes, diets, who's hot. In-group men can talk about sports, golf, hunting, and the workplace, but that's considered men talking about business. Also, corporate culture has a history of in-group male bonding and joking that objectifies the out-groups. As a woman of color, I've experienced these patterns and blind spots in workplace environments. If I found a workplace was toxic, I left as soon as I had a better job. And if you recognize any of these patterns, it's time to reflect on how to clean and update the company culture so it is healthy. Now, the second thing that Madison needs to do if it wants to be Plan A destination for talent, Madison has to offer a vibrant community to live in. Jessica shared with me the story of a woman who had a great job in Madison, but this woman found herself feeling isolated and with nothing to do outside of work. But more urgently, she could not find a hairstylist who knew how to cut and care for her black hair. She had to drive to Chicago to get her hair done. I can attest to the frustration of getting bad haircuts from stylists who do not know my hair. So I drive 15 minutes and 2 cities over to an Asian shopping center so I can get my hair cut by my Korean stylist. Then after I get my hair cut, I shop at the Korean market so I can get the foods that my regular market does not carry. These are the little things that make a community feel like home. So during COVID's lockdown, I was lucky to have space in our backyard where I was able to start a garden. I cleaned up the plot, put in garden beds, got soil, got tools, picked and planted seeds, watered them, and waited. My farmer friend saw my post about my garden and gave me a cutting from his dill plant. I gave it a good start. I made sure it had light, I watered it regularly. And this winter, we had a lot of rain. I forgot about my dill plant. But when the storm stopped and the sun came out, I went out to my garden to pull the weeds and clean up the yard. To my surprise, I was delighted to see I had 4 more dill plants that had propagated on its own. The dill made more dill. This is like the rule of people. Good people know other good people, and it applies to how people migrate. My parents came to America because Korea was in shambles after the war. Jobs were scarce. America opened up to allow Korean immigration. My parents had several friends who had found economic opportunity in America. Based on their friends' word of mouth, my parents applied to immigrate, and when they received the letter that they could come, my father reached out to his friend. That friend let my parents and my sisters stay with him until they found their own apartment. My parents did odd jobs. My mom was a house cleaner and a hairdresser. My father was a cook. They scraped and saved and got a loan from my mother's parents to buy a dry cleaners. When my mother and father was settled and doing well, my mother helped her 2 brothers buy and set up their own dry cleaners. Why am I telling you this story? Because people migrate in clusters. This is how ethnic communities get into a niche industry. It's by word of mouth and communal support. This is why a lot of Koreans run dry cleaners or Indian families run motels. On the Zoom call, I wondered out loud to Ed if companies could consider hiring a family or clusters of college friends at job fairs. Of course, the best candidates should be hired, but good people know other good people. Is it possible that when a company is hired, they could hire clusters of people, perhaps all from the same college or at a job fair in a community? If a company can't hire in clusters, how about asking the most recent hire if they know of other people they could recommend? So I read the Madison Region Advance Now report. And I took out this excerpt. The interviewed leaders noted that retention and attraction of minority professionals was difficult because of a lack of support systems for new hires and their spouses. One interviewee noted that Black professionals in the Madison region have 1 foot in and 1 foot out the door, frustrated that they do not have a place in white society or among the high percentage of low-income African Americans in the region. I read between the lines, and this means there's no place for your talented new hire to hang out or get the food they want or get a good place to get their hair cut. Hillary Clinton coined the phrase, "It takes a village to raise a child." It takes a village to make people feel like they belong. Who is the Madison region a village for? In our Zoom call, Jessica mentioned that there is a significant Hmong community here. I was super excited to hear that, but because following California and Minnesota, Wisconsin has the 3rd largest Hmong population in the country. I wanted to share this story about how cultures can benefit from sharing and cross-pollination. I was selling products at the UC Irvine campus. A young European student stopped by my booth. He told me he had dated an angry little Asian girl and that my art reminded him of her. He told me she was Hmong. I could tell he was heartbroken. I asked him what happened. He shared with me how he loved her so much, but she was often emotional towards him. She was loving, but also yelled at him a lot. He told me that once he had tried to stroke her hair, but when he did, she flinched and it triggered a bad reaction. When he asked her why she reacted like that, she explained that in her family, she was often hit on the backside of her head and was told she was stupid or worthless. Now, I want to make a disclaimer. Not all Hmong and Asian families have such low regard for their daughters. It depends on each ethnic family's assimilation. But being that I am the 4th daughter in an Asian family, I had a good sense of her home life. To make sure I could shed accurate light about why she broke up with him, I asked if her family knew she was dating him. He said no, she had kept him a secret. From his answer, I knew that she and I were raised with similar expectations. It's hard to be part of an ethnic bubble that expects their daughters to be obedient and do exactly as they're told. I explained she probably broke up with him because she's not allowed to date, and she especially can't marry someone outside of her ethnic group. It hadn't occurred to him that her culture was why they weren't together anymore. He had been taking it personally, wondering what he did wrong. I told him he'd done nothing wrong, but it was the pressure of her family and her culture that was burdening her. He, being a Danish exchange student, hadn't ever considered how difficult it was for her to date him. I could see the sadness in his eyes and body lighten a bit. He thanked me, and then he exclaimed that he had to buy something for me. I wasn't trying to push a sale at all, but again, here is the law of reciprocity at play again. He ended up buying a book, but the book is not what's important. What will stay with him is the insight I gave him. His breakup was not about him, but about her culture's expectations of her. I recently reread a book I read in college called The Red Queen by Matt Ridley. When I first read it, it opened my eyes to how human nature evolved around reproduction and resources. It explained why men have midlife crisis sports cars. It explained why young women wear crop tops to show off their midsection. The author also discusses how historically royals who relied on reproducing with their own kind often had genetic defects because the offspring receive one copy of genes from each parent. This causes a risk that the parents will both pass a copy of the recessive gene onto their offspring, and in turn, their offspring are more likely to externalize their recessive gene. Matt Ridley then theorizes that mixing genes with people not related is actually beneficial for stronger genes. This scientific observation goes against the tribalism we normally operate by. We are all guilty of our own version of tribalism. We naturally want to stay within our group. When I introduced my Japanese-American boyfriend to my parents, I was afraid they would hate him. Koreans hate Japanese people because of centuries of geopolitical oppression. I was expected to marry a Korean man. Thankfully, my parents were grateful that any Asian man wanted their feisty troublemaker daughter. So I was able to marry the man of my choice. I would guess that the people of Madison have their groups and they want their kind to stay with their own. Without meeting the Hmong girl or her parents, I could tell her behavior was probably due to pressure that her family wanted their daughter to marry their own. But the story about the Hmong girl and her Danish boyfriend is important because it shows to me how they would have benefited from the outside influence of each other. From how he talked about her, I could tell he was very kind, and I could tell he absolutely loved her. I think how they were different would have made the other person better. Had they been able to stay together, the way he treated her would have greatly eased the negative aspects of her family's beliefs. They both would have been happier. We as people need each other to share ideas, to teach ourselves about better ways to live. Artists are canaries. An early form of coal mining methodology was using canaries. Miners took caged canaries down into mine tunnels. If dangerous gases such as carbon monoxide collected in the mine, the gases would kill the canary before killing the miners, thus providing a warning to exit the tunnels immediately. I live in Los Angeles, where rent is expensive and home ownership is out of reach for many young people who are priced out of nicer areas. So you know what happened? The young gays and artists went out and searched for cheap real estate. They went to Highland Park, which was predominantly Hispanic with gangs and crime. They moved there, made everything prettier like they do. They made their coffee and bookshops, restaurants and hair salons, and then soon after, everyone else followed them. Now the yuppies have moved into Highland Park, and the area has become cool and more expensive with chic shops and boutiques. With regions and real estate, artists and gay people are the canaries. If a region can allow young artsy people to thrive, then it is a welcome sign for tolerance, acceptance, and freedom of thought. All those metropolitan cities that people from Madison are moving to, they all have thriving arts communities. In recent years, the Austin South by Southwest Film Festival has become a prestige festival. Seattle has an arts district. There's lots to do and see in other metropolitan cities. Art is vital to a community. It gives people something to do. It nourishes the soul. It gets people out and about and talking. So I just recently attended the Tremors Festival in downtown Santa Fe in New Mexico. And that picture to the left are all the people that came from Iowa, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Arizona, California. That's George R.R. Martin, and that is Don Michael Paul, the director of 5, 6, and 7. So George R.R. Martin, the author of Game of Thrones, bought a book in a coffee shop. So that's the... I didn't get to go in because the Sunday hours was noon to 4, and I was in the screening. He also bought this train. He painted a dragon on it, and they do dinner and a show inside with live performances. It's very cool. It doesn't move very far. It just goes back and forth on the track in the downtown area. But still, it has brought a lot of excitement. So my co-star, Michael Gross, and Mr. Martin met because one wanted to buy an old train from the other. It turned out that George R.R. Martin was a big fan of Tremors. He suggested they do a Tremors festival showing all 7 movies over a weekend at the movie theater he owned, the Violet Crown. It happened the last weekend of April. I went, and it brought the producers and the cast out, and many fans traveled from Iowa, Texas, Oklahoma, Denver, Arizona, and California to gather to watch the movies. The festival generated a lot of excitement and a lot of business for the hotels, restaurant, rental cars, and shops in town. I just have to show you this one. I met George R.R. Martin. So the fans came out to meet the creators, cast, and crew. I was in the short-lived series that was on Sci-Fi. They didn't show the series, but I didn't care because I wanted to come and take a picture with him. So this is how art and community are symbiotic in creating commerce. Artists are the canaries for a community. And let me tell you another story about an artist, this time a dancer. My acting teacher took us on a field trip to Death Valley to see the ballerina Marta Beckett. In 1968, Marta Beckett was a Broadway dancer. She and her husband wanted to see more of America, so they took her dance show on the road, touring from New York and stopping in towns along the way with their goal to reach Los Angeles. But along the way, their car got a flat. Marta and her husband had to walk to the nearest gas station, which happened to be near an abandoned theater house. They inquired who owned the abandoned theater and asked if they could rent it. She and her husband cleaned it up, and her husband repurposed coffee cans into stage lights. She taught dance to the local children and did shows for the townspeople, but sometimes she didn't have anyone watching her dance at all. One day, after a flash flood, she was sweeping the mud and she got an idea to paint the walls with the mural of people sitting as her audience. When she completed her murals, she always had an audience, even if they weren't real. In 1970, journalists from the National Geographic discovered Beckett doing a performance at the Amargosa Opera House without a real audience. Their profile and another in Life magazine led to an international interest in Beckett and her theater. She began performing to visitors from around the world, including such notables as Ray Bradbury and Red Skelton. My teacher and my classmates went to see her show in 2005. The ticket taker was her husband, who had become the town's mailman. It boggled my mind. I had to see it myself to believe it. There was not an empty seat. I wondered how she was able to sell out her show. She lived in Death Valley. There was nothing out there but tumbleweeds and cactus trees. Who and where did these people in the audience come from? On the walls were the murals she painted, evidence that she had started out dancing only to her imaginary audience. Now she sold out shows. When the show started, the master of ceremonies, her ticket-taker husband, came on stage, asked us to turn off our cell phones, the coffee can lights turned bright, the curtains parted, and Marta Beckett took the stage. She was the spryest 81-year-old woman I'd ever seen, and a living testament to Goethe's quote on commitment. I incorporated my business in 2003. I'd been selling enough shirts and licensing enough products that I needed to form a corporation. As I mentioned, I got a loan from my sister. She loaned me $10,000 so I could buy a computer, buy another round of shirts, pay a screen printer, buy a scanner, pay a trademark lawyer. When my parents and their other Korean friends needed money for their businesses, they formed a group of 7 or 10 people. Each month, they put in $1,000 into the pot, and every person would take a turn taking the pot. $10,000 to buy a dry cleaning machine they needed, or another person would use it to buy inventory. The Koreans had to do this because they didn't have credit and no banks would loan to them. I was able to pay my sister back, and thereafter, I funded my business capital needs with money I received from acting jobs. I operated like this, not knowing there was a better way. In 2013, after I was a business banking client for 10 years, my banker called me and asked if I had any business goals. I told him I did. I needed more capital to buy larger quantities of inventory to bring my costs of goods down. He gave me a loan and a business line of credit. With these financial tools, I made inventory. I also paid that loan off, and I kept growing. But it wasn't until COVID that I heard of an SBA loan. I was in a panic because all public events had been canceled during the lockdown. Searching for solutions, I stumbled upon the SBA website and saw they had all kinds of loans for women and minority-owned businesses. It took a pandemic for me to find out about these tools I wish I would have known about before. In 2022, I got my first SBA loan, 19 years after I incorporated my business. I'm sharing with you this story because Ed, Jessica, and Brian mentioned on the Zoom meeting that there are government agencies in attendance this afternoon. So what tools are your agencies able to bring out from the back room? When someone moves here for a job, they most likely have a family, a wife, a husband, other relatives who have other talent. Maybe the new hire working in Exact Sciences or Epic is married to someone whose dream is to open their own restaurant or their own bookshop. Maybe their husband has a God-given talent to cut hair. Maybe their wife or mother-in-law is an amazing cook, or they love coffee and books. What hidden tools can your city provide? What tools can you tell other people about? In tandem to hiring employees at companies, some marketing to tell people about small business loans for opening Main Street shops would really help build an economic ecosystem. The companies in Madison are job creators. They hire talented people. Good people know other good people. And if there is additional awareness and support from banks and government development agencies who can offer to help the spouses who have dreams of opening up their own small businesses, this can really help build a thriving community. because that restaurant owner will be a job creator too. They will hire good people, be a gathering place for people to connect, share, and grow a community. If you are an employer, ask your employees if they or anyone in their family needs anything. Ask them what's on their mind. The act of listening and referring to them to opportunities and solutions will be appreciated and will foster loyalty. Remember the law of reciprocity. You'll find the time you took to listen and find out what is really pulsing in their heart will be remembered and reciprocated. We stay in a community because it is thriving, because of the relationships we have with other people. People need places to meet, eat, and connect. That's how a diverse community gets built up. That's a garden. Thank you for asking me what I think. I think it's a great sign of a great intention to bring me, an outsider, to help your conference think outside the box and to help solve Greater Madison's dilemma. Going back to the Urban League of Greater Madison's website, I saw 3 words: empower, educate, and employ. I hope my talk educated this audience about blind spots and empowered you with ideas and solutions to better employ the members of your community. Because it's true, a community that is empowered, educated, and employed can advance economically and live well. I hope in a few years that Greater Madison becomes the thriving community it wants to be. I think I went over, but I'm supposed to give 15 minutes for a Q&A, so I welcome anyone to raise their hands. Yes, in the green back.
Hi, I'm Lisa Mackenzie, and I was really excited to hear you today because about 6 months ago I started to teach academic, and the very quote that you created or that you shared with us today is exactly what I did to create my intention. Sorry, I'm emotional, and now I've gone beyond what I thought I could do. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
So also, like if people here today take what they learned with the DEI and set the intention to be better about it, to be open about it, to keep their heart open. Like imagine where you could be in 6 months. You know, if you take what you've learned and try and be better, who knows what will affect you in 6 months.
Well said, thank you. No other questions? Yes. Lady ingredients. Okay.
Happy Easter in Pacific Islander.
Yes, thank you. It's May.
I really love your philosophical approach to life, and it seems like you just be really grounded. And I'm curious, recognizing all that you're navigating and juggling, would you personally just stay grounded with your truths and your values on a regular basis, or what do you like to
Well, so I start my morning with praying, and I always list all the things I'm grateful for, and then I also make goals. So I'm a little bit of an overachiever. I had to be because my parents wouldn't love me unless I got straight A's. So I did have a bout with carpal tunnel because when I was starting out, I was really hard on myself. So I had a day planner and I'd write book. And so that was the thing that I had to accomplish that day, in addition to having a day job. And I would look at it and be like, oh my God, I didn't write the book. But I realized I was being too hard on myself and that I really needed to break that down because I can't write a book in a day. So I said, oh, this is stressing me out because I actually am like I also, because I'm Asian, I have a very conditioned obedience to like orders. So I had to break it down. I'm like, I can do 3 pages a day. So let's change that to write 3 pages a day. So I think that if you have a really big goal, that you break it down into small action steps that you can do daily, because those small things will add up to big achievements. And then having a good balance and finding time to have fun is helpful. So I would force myself to go to museums, because I was never allowed to have fun when I was growing up either. I always had to be very productive. So I would just take myself on excursions to either like shop or go to a thrift shop or go to a museum or see a movie, because as an artist you do need to nourish, and even as an entrepreneur, because when you're creating a business, it is a creative endeavor and you need ideas, because you're creating something that you don't want to create a business that there's 10 of. You want to create a business that there's not anything like. So it requires a lot of different influences. And as you can tell from my speech, I read a lot. I mean, I was reading that woman's, What Works for Women at work. I read The Red Queen. I just, whatever I'm curious about, I'll go and seek that book or some sort of like maybe movie or documentary, and just learn about something, because you get your ideas from everywhere. I hope that helps. Yeah. The lady in the back.
So as you spoke about welcoming communities and the concept of like Madison working on improving the differences in allowing the entrepreneurship and the growth of the different communities. One of the things, and is that I'm sitting in this room and being in Madison for 10 years, and I am not any part of any company, and as a Black woman, and thinking about the welcoming that this city offers. We talk about like, and hearing all of the things that you were listing about, like the places and the seats at the table and the opportunities. Everything was like something that myself and my friend with me here have experienced. So the question is, you know, you talk about artists like having the art spaces. We have a growing art space, but it's not a growing art space for myself. It's not a growing art space for my son to go to. It's a growing art space for everybody else, but for not so much for the Black community. And if you are stuck in between a two-place situation, right? If you're not at the top of the table for the money making, and if you're at the bottom of the table, if you're not down there, when you're sitting kind of riding the train line, right? And the train line really is the right one. But when you're teetering in the neighborhood I live in, I've been in my neighborhood for 10 years. I would love to leave my neighborhood, but I'm a single mother, raising 2 children, and many other women, many other people are sitting in the same boat. But because there has been such a push for movement of growth of Madison, and we talk about the gentrification and things like that, the gentrification of Madison is not for me and mine. It's for the ethic employees. It's for the exact science employees. It's not for your middle of the road employee. It's not for your entrepreneur. There's growth here, yes. Madison is in one of the top 100 cities to live in. It's a destination place to live in. But it's not a destination place for me.
Right, I hear you.
So how is that actually being addressed? Instead of trying, like where's the actual work? Because I'm given tools, but to have the time to decide, am I going to utilize these tools that are being put in front of my face and be a mother, volunteer at my son's school, where I'm also seeing a huge disparity, and it's the charter school in Madison that everybody, and especially, unfortunately, many of us in the Black community have snubbed our noses to. Where is the actual work? Instead of the trying, where are people actually at? Where is the actual support? Because also, as a Black woman, who, by the way, is also biracial, I have to code switch for which neighborhood I'm sitting in.
Yes.
So how does that really come down to the bottom line? Being in this room with everybody today and seeing the division, right? So we have those of us that are open tables and those of us that are bigger paying tables. Because I was grateful enough to get a ticket because of a connection. So with all of the things that were said today, I would like to know, how do I and many other people that are sitting in the same space as me actually get to feel it and get to see it in our lifetime or before we actually even leave the city? Because it's not a place for us. It's a place for everybody else.
So I can feel your frustration, especially as a mother. So I had to kind of pause my career because I had 2 kids, and the money I made from working went straight to my babysitter, and I realized this is untenable. So being a working mom is super challenging because childcare is so expensive. So I think in this instance of the situation you're explaining, and I don't know the day-to-day and the daily challenges you face, but I would say childcare is probably a #1 problem for you, or obstacle, and for other women that you interact with daily. It's childcare is expensive, but so when it comes to sort of solutions, it's like if you look within yourself, I really think so. I had a mother's helper who came. She was a college student. She was a dreamer, and with the job, I mean, I gave her bonuses, whatever, but she was able to become a citizen. And then, so funny, she's a Latina, but because she saw how nice my husband was, and another person at her church was married to a Japanese man, she ended up marrying a Japanese man. And I guess I'm going off track, but what I had always, she was so good. She went on and got her graduate and master's degree, but I told her that she is such a good babysitter. She needs to own her own daycares. And I have another story that's related to daycares. My friend's friend, their family was really rich, but they had a father who gave them a choice that when he was writing his will, they could either get one of the 4 daycares that he owned and operated, or he'd get $1 million. Each of them decided to take a daycare because it generated so much money. So I think there is an opportunity there because you have a problem, and you need to think of your pain point. Be like, how do I solve my pain? Because if I'm having this pain, I had the pain of angry little Asian girl being suppressed, like I couldn't talk back. So I had a pain point. And if you look at the pain point and you figure out how to solve this pain, I bet you will solve the pain of other women, and it can become a very good business. There's a website. I was trying to help my former babysitter to get started on making some sort of a daycare center, but there's accreditation, certification from the state, but it is something that I think you have to start in your community. And what are the needs of your community? And you don't need to look at corporations because they're kind of doing their own thing. They're not really, the patterns that I went through of what works for women at work. That's probably maybe going on in there. So I think for your case, you need to really think about, how can I solve my problem? And if I solve this problem for myself, there's probably 8 other women that need this too. I don't know. I hope that helps. And then also, I think that if you made a really good business plan, you could go to a bank with that and get some sort of a loan.
Thank you, Lela, and thank you all for being with us here for this important 10th anniversary. We strove to deliver a slate of exceptional speakers from around the nation. Today's speakers joined us from the East Coast, the West Coast, the South, and of course, the Midwest. So I really enjoyed this conversation today. We had very creative presenters. just the different styles and the different topics just were, I think, a wonderful show of diversity in and of itself. Many of the workplace examples that was given in Lela's presentation, I too can relate to those examples. I can remember when I was working at the Department of Transportation, I got my first management job, and I turned in my first report. And our secretary's office, or our CEO's office, liked that report. And one of my colleagues who was at the same level as me, she had been a supervisor longer than me, and she said, that was a great report for an affirmative action hire. And I'm like, excuse me? And I'm like, so tell me about, your preparation, and I'll tell you about mine. And so she had 1 master's degree. I had 2 master's degrees. She had 2 years of planning experience. I had 5 years of planning experience. I said, if anybody's an affirmative action appointee, I would think you were, because my credentials are much stronger than yours. But that type of stuff continues to happen. And we, in this conference today, as the sister brought out, there's certainly still challenges here, in Madison and in nonprofits and in private sector. So we didn't, promise to have all the solutions today. But having this type of conversation is a great start, and it allows us to move forward. So I really do thank you all for participating today, and really look forward to celebrating with you a little bit later with ice cream. But I'm going to turn it over to Jason.
Thank you, Ruben. And I'd like to echo Ruben's sentiments and thank all of you for sticking with us over the last decade, especially our event sponsors, who your support, without it, we couldn't be here and hold these sessions. Your support allows us to continue to bring an exceptional speaker from around the nation each year, and we've had several of those. I hope that the day was equally inspiring for you all, and that you will leave with a set of new strategies that will allow you to continue on your journeys toward more inclusive organizations and communities. That said, I do think that the last conversation was an important one, because, and forgive me if I digress a little bit, but I think as a 49-year-old African-American black man, whatever you want to call us, right? I really don't care. There, at some point, you get to what is going to be your legacy in all of this, right? And your life is not just about you. By God's law, we are charged to love humanity, or love mankind, and then leave this place in a better way we found it. And sometimes that means you got to ask yourself, what am I doing to contribute to the solution or the problem? That's ultimately the question we all have to ask ourselves. And hopefully, if you are God-fearing or you love human beings, I love mankind. Human beings I'm not so thrilled about, right? But it's going to take all of us. And so you get up every morning and you continue to make the fight. You continue to do it. You continue to fight. Is it easy? No. If it would be easy, everybody'd be doing it. And so continue to ask yourselves, as Jason said earlier, and I thought about this and talked with my team, there were people who got up every day to yell at this little 5-year-old girl. We have to have the same vigor and energy. And if her and her parents didn't get tired, then we shouldn't either. So ask yourselves, when you leave here, what are you going to do to be a part of the solution, or will you continue to somehow be a part of the problem? That's ultimately what I think we take here from all of this. How will you get involved? And to the sister, I get it. If I tell you about my story when I first got here, but I'm from Milwaukee, so we got our own set of issues there. But at the end of the day, it's about my wife and I leaving this place, helping out any person of color, helping out white folks, helping whoever get us to a point where we're moving the needle. It's not easy. And some days as a person of color, and this is to my white brothers and sisters, y'all, it ain't easy. It is tough. Because sometimes we shouldn't be the people telling you how to deal with racism, because we're the people experiencing it. Okay. So with that said, either we shut up or put up. That's it. It's only 2 choices. I love being here because I get a chance to spend time with Ruben and learn, and from all of you. And coming from Milwaukee, the one thing I can say is I am very adamant about the fact that I do believe that majority of the people here want to see us move in the right direction. Now, we got to have some come to Jesus meetings and get rid of some egos. But if we keep at it, we'll get there. Is that enough banter? They have us in the script bantering.
That's enough. You know, but look, Jason, you know, so thank you for imparting that wisdom, and you know, it's going to take work, and I think we'll get there someday in Madison. We're not there yet. But as long as we all are continuing to kind of work and try to move in the right direction, I think we're going to be okay. So as we close, we just want to, again, thank you, you know, for coming out today. And I hope you'll join us on the terrace for ice cream, the ice cream extravaganza that we have there. This has been a great day for me. I've certainly learned quite a bit from the presenters, and I certainly was glad to see many of you that I haven't seen in a while. So thank you. Let's go have some ice cream.